That is not the only group that I saw. You know, I saw groups down there, and I think what we've asked the January 6th committee to do is to understand what those people were doing in the Capitol complex.
Why were they there? I mean, we're continuing to hear accusations that some January 6th insurrectionists did reconnaissance inside the COVID-closed Capitol complex, possibly while on guided tours led by U.S. lawmakers the day before January 6th. The committee understandably wants answers from one of those lawmakers, Republican Congressman Barry Loudermilk. In May of 2021, Loudermilk filed an ethics complaint against Democrats for even alleging that members of Congress led suspicious tours. Fast forward an entire year to last month, and the committee said it had information that it wanted Loudermilk to address. His story then began changing. First, he said he gave a tour to a constituent family with young children. The very next day, his story changed again to include the family's guests. Then this past Tuesday, Capitol Police responded to inquiries from the committee saying, saying, quote, "We do not consider any of the activities that we observed as suspicious." That was a statement celebrated by the congressman.
There was nothing nefarious that happened on the 5th.
No one in this group was even at the Capitol on January 6th. So this entire thing, this entire scenario was a narrative that was made up by the January 6th committee, and there was absolutely zero truth to it.
No truth to it? Well, use your eyes, see for yourself. The very next day, the committee released this video challenging that conclusion. They say it shows Loudermilk leading a tour inside the complex. And the committee says the man seen taking pictures of security checkpoints later recorded video while marching on the Capitol the very next day.
Check out my flag I made, guys. You see it? There you go, baby. That's for a certain person.
That's right. That's for somebody special.
There's no escape, Pelosi, Schumer, Nadler. We're coming for you. Even you, AOC, we're coming to take you out.
Loudermilk is now calling it a smear campaign, releasing so-called evidence of a tour of the House office buildings. So-called evidence? Stick a pin in this one, because as the story evolves, so does the congressman and his statements. Joining me now, though, to figure all this out is Ryan Riley, a justice reporter for NBC News. He's actually on set with me. Ryan, thank you so much for being here. Congressman Loudermilk, so he's now being asked about the tour, and let's take a quick listen to exactly what he said.
Why do you think pictures were being taken of the stairwell, around security?
If you go to that stairwell, there's a golden eagle sconce that's on the wall. That's what he's taking a picture of.
Ryan, you tweeted a picture of that golden eagle sconce. It's really not what he was taking a picture of, right?
I think that it's a bit like, so listen, I think there are very reasonable reasons why they would want to question Representative Loudermilk about what happened and about this tour. Like, right, completely. If you just watch that video, there are a lot of, and basically I think the video the next day is really the most damning thing, where you have him making this individual who was on this tour making threats against, members of Congress and filming someone else who had a spear with an American flag on it. But, I think that parts of the tour, there were, tourists do a lot of strange things. I think that, in retrospect, comparing that video and what he did the day before certainly raises a lot of questions. But I will say it is a cool golden eagle. I won't deny it is a neat golden eagle. I took that photo in 2019. That was probably like 13 years after I first started covering the Hill. So it's not like, it's not necessarily the worst explanation in the world for that. The trains are also very cool, which they took photos of. But of course, the real question is, what were they taking photos of with those security exits? And the real, the bigger issue is here that there was this plan online to set up these fake appointments with individuals and members of Congress on January 6th itself as a way to get into the Capitol buildings, the buildings surrounding the Capitol. So I think that when you connect the dots on some of these things, it certainly has a good basis for why you would want to question Representative Loudermilk about what exactly he experienced.
So let's back up for a second, though. Putting all joking aside about the Golden Eagle sconce, you've got a person who ends up on January 6th on Capitol grounds. Before we started this segment, you brought up a really good point. You've been tracking the prosecutions of the January 6th defendants. And kind of the key issue, though, Ryan, is how far into the Capitol do you get? Because I really want people to understand this. So can you briefly explain that guy who's threatening Nadler, Pelosi, AOC, if he doesn't actually enter the Capitol, do you even have a crime to prosecute?
I mean, you could prosecute that crime, but the DOJ, because they have so many cases, aren't going to prosecute that crime, right? If you look at those photos of the thousands of people that are on the actual inauguration platform, all of those people are engaged in a crime, right? Like that's criminal activity. They're unlawfully on the grounds of the Capitol. It's a misdemeanor, but you could prosecute it. Where DOJ has sort of drawn those lines is actually entering into the Capitol building or using violence outside the Capitol building or taking some other overt actions. For example, that individual in Michigan who is running for governor is actually leading the polls for the Republican primary. Yeah. He was an individual who was encouraging people to storm the Capitol. So because he took that action, they chose to charge him. But prosecutors have sort of drawn this line right now that you have to take some sort of overt action outside the building, or you have to have entered the building. If you enter the building, you're good for a charge.
But armed with a American flagged spear and threatening members of Congress, you don't think DOJ is going to be interested in that?
Potentially, yes. I think that they potentially could. I think it depends how far they progress actually onto the grounds, because obviously that is a weapon. So if they find that if they find him with, that video, you piece a few of those pieces together, depending on how far he got onto Capitol grounds, I certainly think that's something that DOJ would take an interest in.
So let's talk about Loudermilk, though, because that's really the issue. He's had inconsistent stories since day one. There was no tour. It was a tour of a family with young children. And now we're getting to the point where I'm completely exonerated, Lori Ingram, because nothing is going on. It's just a bad narrative that's being spun by the 1-6 committee. Does Loudermilk himself, though, run the risk of getting maybe subpoenaed by the 1-6 committee or having even some type of exposure, do you think, with the DOJ looking into him in terms of having given access to the Capitol grounds the day before the insurrection?
DOJ is going to be very cautious before investigating, of course, any member of Congress. I think that, the committee has certainly laid out a very reasonable explanation for wanting to question him. And I think that they've proven, certainly here that there was a valid reason for them to want to find out more information about what exactly was happening that day, because you just put those videos together. I think what it speaks to also is this idea you had a lot of members of Congress, Republican members of Congress, who voted to disenfranchise their own voters and appease a lot of these individuals who believed in a lot of these conspiracy theories about January 6th.
Yeah, so, Ryan, you also have some latest reporting that just came out that I found to be very interesting. Tell us about the 1776 returns. This is that the Proud Boys actually had this explicitly detailed roadmap on how to get into the Capitol complex. And what were they going to do?
Yeah, so this document came out in the course of this investigation by a defense attorney who filed it as an attachment. We hadn't seen this document before. It had only been referenced in these indictments, and it really does lay out this detailed plan, both a public-facing and a inside-facing version.
Inside job, though, facing?
It was more of a inside. Here's what we're going to communicate just to the key players of this plan, right?
Yes.
So here's what we're going to communicate internally with this plan, and then here's what we're going to send out to all the quote-unquote patriots who are going to be participants in this plan on the day of, because that's what really it involved, is bringing a lot of these sort of normies, as they refer to them, normal people, into the Capitol. So these breach points that they wanted to create, openings for people to swarm what they had originally planned to be Capitol buildings, according to the indictment. They had originally wanted to bring people into all of these Capitol buildings. In fact, that one that we saw, this congressman giving a tour of was one of the buildings on that list. They want to bring them inside to all these Capitol buildings because I don't think they necessarily thought that they would be able to get into the Capitol. They thought there was going to be better security on the Capitol on January 6th.
So very quickly, though, you're writing a book about the January 6th insurrection, about the prosecutions, the investigations, et cetera. Are you a little worried, though, Ryan, that if this keeps on going on, that maybe you're never going to be able to finish that book?
Good question. Yes, I think my editor might have the same question. I think there are a lot of trials that are getting delayed a little bit right now, but I think that this is the key here is this is a very long timeline, right? I think that 5 years is the way you should sort of think of this, because 5 years is when the statute of limitations is going to come up on some of these crimes. So it even goes beyond that, really. But, there are hundreds of these cases to come, and the DOJ is already pretty overwhelmed. Public defenders are overwhelmed. This is really taking a strain on the court system already, and there are hundreds more cases to come.
Well, we believe you're going to finish that book. We have faith. Ryan Riley, NBC Justice reporter, I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.